Hello and namaste. My name is Brandon, and welcome to the next video in my series on time series analysis. In this video, we will do some contextual work and learn about how to formulate robust and accurate time series problems. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get started. So the benefits of knowledge about the future, aside from the obvious. First, the elephant in the room. Students and business persons alike often jump straight into data analysis without thinking through the actual problem and the context surrounding it. And that is the main thing we want to address in this video. So for time series at the level of human action and awareness, the arrow of time only moves forward. It seems obvious, but in time series especially, we are looking forward. Now, not to be morbid, but aside from physical death, the future is only a horizon of possibilities tied to probabilities. So we should think about time series as possibilities and probabilities. So having an accurate and well-informed hypothesis about the future allows better decisions to be made now. That's often the reason we do time series forecasting to begin with. Now, I will say there are time series methods that are more geared towards understanding why the past happened in the way it did to inform future decisions. Now, many natural phenomena and human behaviors are not random. They follow predictable patterns that can be discovered and analyzed, allowing a glimpse into the future. So here's the foundational idea of forecasting, and I want you to get this tattooed on your body, just kidding, or hanging up on a sign or in your office or wherever else, because this is the guiding principle. Robust, accurate forecasts are made when future conditions are like past conditions. So when we do time series forecasting, we are using data from the past. Now, for the future to resemble that, to make good forecasts in the future, future conditions should resemble past conditions. A perfect example of this is COVID. So there were many forecasts that were done in 2019, and then in January of 2020, COVID hit for the first time really hard. And then all the forecasts that were made in business or personal forecasts or what have you, all went out the window. Why? Well, future conditions changed. They became very, very drastically different. So to make robust and accurate forecasts, we are assuming that future conditions will be like past conditions. And if they're not, we are going to have problems, or at the very least, our forecasts won't be very accurate. So modeling versus forecasting. Here's a Venn diagram that's helpful when two ideas overlap a bit in the middle, yet still have their own distinct qualities. So on the left, we have descriptive modeling. On the right, we have predictive forecasting. Now, they do share the characteristic of using seasonality, trend, level, and noise in the forecast. One difference is that in descriptive modeling, we tend to use extra variables, so explanatory variables. They often look like multiple regression problems, to be honest. In predictive forecasting, we're often using only the time series itself, whatever else that is. So really, in predictive forecasting, we have two columns of data. We have the date or the time, whatever time interval we're looking at. That's the first column. Then we have the data itself in the second column. That's it. In descriptive modeling, we often have many columns for many variables because we're looking at the problem differently. So in descriptive modeling, it tends to be more complex, has a longer horizon, looking for explanations, cause and effect, and involves external criteria. So a good example of this is econometrics. On the right, we have a shorter horizon, black box methods potentially, immediacy, accuracy, speed. An example of this is day trading. So if I'm a day trader, all I'm really looking at is the level of whatever asset or assets I am trading that day. I'm not going back into the past and looking at other external factors. I'm not building explanatory models or anything like that. I'm looking at levels and looking at entrances and exits to my positions. It's a different way of looking at a time series. Now, of course, there are overlaps here. They're not completely distinct, but we tend to put things into these two buckets. Here is the PHIVE framework, PHIVE. This is largely based on Ord Fildes, the 2013 version of their book, which I highly recommend for anyone's bookshelf, by the way. Now, I have gone in and added my own personal thoughts and ideas to this, but the general framework is theirs. So, what is PHIVE? P is for purpose, H is for horizon, I is information, V is value, and E is evaluation. Let's take each one of those in turn. First, purpose. We should first express a defined and specific purpose, use, or reason for generating the forecast. Is it for business decisions, so stock buybacks, hiring cadence, other business investments, and so on? What about planning purposes? So resourcing, staff allocation, other policies, and so on. Optimization strategy, supply and demand, inventory planning, maybe office space planning. Now, of course, these are not mutually exclusive. Some kind of go into the others. But in general, what is the purpose for generating the forecast? We allow the purpose to inform the forecasting and match the two together. Once the forecast is generated, how will it be used and how will it be shared? What action or actions may result of the forecast outcome? So going from beginning to end, what is the flow and the purpose of making the forecast? Horizon. Related to purpose is the horizon. How far into the future do we wish to forecast and why? What is our tolerance for uncertainty? Time series that are more variable have more uncertainty. Time series forecasts that are further into the future have more uncertainty, of course. Now, oftentimes, the length of the forecasting horizon is directly related to the scope and complexity of past information that's used to make the forecast. So there can be a connection between forecasting horizon and the amount of past data we have. Short-term forecasting values the most recent information. Long-term forecasting necessitates both a larger quantity and a wider variety of information and the possibility of the inclusion of other variables. And of course, what is the starting point? What is the aggregation level and the scale of the data? If we're interested in some economic trait, do we need to go back to 1930 or can we start at 1980 or the year 2000? Do we want monthly data? Do we want yearly data, weekly, so on? And what's the scale? What's the actual measure we're interested in? All things to keep in mind. Information. What information is available and what are its characteristics? Is it public information? Is it proprietary? Is it accurate? Timely? Is it standard or niche? Is it generated automatically or do we have to manually go in and grab the data? Is the data clean? Is it dirty? Are there gaps in the data? Is the data corrupt in some way? Of the available information, what is necessary to meet the needs of the forecast purpose and horizon? So generally, we like to keep our data sets lean and only use the data that's absolutely necessary to generate our forecast. So what information is most stable versus more volatile? Is there a measure we could use that's similar, that tends to be more stable and therefore can generate a more accurate forecast potentially? Or do we have to rely on more volatile data that might generate more uncertainty in our forecasts? When will the information be available? Do we have to wait on it? Does it come out on a certain day? Is it subject to revision? So if we use one measure in our forecast now, and then some entity or government office comes back and changes or revises that data, what do? Do we set up a time to go in and revise our forecast based on the new data? And can estimations be used? Some forecasting methods allow the use of estimated data. If so, what trade-offs are we making there? Where are the estimations coming from? What information goes into those estimations? Those are things we need to know about the information going into our time series analysis. Value. What are the stakes for the forecast being correct or incorrect? How valuable is the accurate forecast? How meaningful is it? For example, I use the weather forecast to know when to mow my lawn. Is that high stakes? No. Health models for vaccine production, is that high stakes? Absolutely. So what's the value? Some time series forecasts are higher value. So a company forecasting supplier demand might pay a lot for an accurate forecast, since so many other aspects of the business are dependent on that supply-demand forecast. There's a high level of interdependence upon the forecasts. Is the forecast a high-value input to another forecast or decision process? So sometimes forecast data is an input into yet another forecast. And of course, that makes it very valuable potentially. So we have to keep in mind the value of the forecast, how high stakes it is, and whether or not there are interdependencies on that forecast with other elements. Evaluation. Point forecasts or individual value forecasts are largely meaningless. Interval forecasts are best, often necessary, or often required. So we'll see forecasts that have a confidence interval or some sort of fan chart to them that allow for certain bands of probabilities or confidences for the forecast going into the future. And of course, those bands and confidence intervals often get wider, usually almost always get wider, the further out into the future we're trying to forecast. So a forecast without continuously evaluating its effectiveness and then adjusting as necessary is just fiddling around. It's very common for forecasters to never go back and evaluate the forecast performance. Iterative review and adjustment almost always makes forecasting more accurate. Now, in my opinion, I think there is a fear of being wrong and perceived as incompetent. So forecasts often go unchecked or unvalidated or are flat out manipulated. We're trying to squeeze all explanatory power out of the forecast except random variability. And one of the best ways to do that is to go back and iteratively adjust the forecast as new information and/or techniques become available. Now, I decided to take the PHIVE framework and add another letter, S, for software and tech. Again, this is just my personal addition based on my personal opinion and what I see around me. So expanding on PHIVES, I have decided to add another consideration for forecasting, software and technology. Let me tell you why. The availability, features, and speed of modern software and hardware influences and affects the other 5 elements. And it also affects the types of problems we can actually conceive of in the beginning. So modern computing power greatly expands these possibilities at the level of problem formulation. If we know we have the tools to help answer that problem, then we can actually ask it. Contemporary algorithms can discern patterns once unimaginable. So numerous software packages, of course, Excel is the most popular one, or Google Sheets are very commonly used tools for time series forecasting. Of course, there's R, so you have the forecast package in R, the Fable package, of course. Profit is not really used anymore because it has some issues in it. And of course, Python has its own packages. And there are others beyond these. And lastly, data transfer rates that are in milliseconds can make a huge difference. So there are companies that have been known to fight over the distance of fiber optic lines because having the shorter fiber optic line gives them an edge. So that is something relatively new that we have to factor into time series forecasting, because if one forecaster gets information a few milliseconds before another, or some automated algorithm gets that information first, then they can have a distinct advantage. So of course, the day trading example is one, arbitrage, bets, the news travels so fast now, and all of those things and other similar things can greatly affect a real-time forecast. So software and technology, in terms of hardware and the software and everything that goes into it, can greatly influence the problems we actually formulate at the beginning stages. So here are some examples. So futures contracts are one example, an obligation for a buyer to purchase a certain asset at a certain price, at a certain date, or close out the position. So airlines use futures contracts for fuel. They can lock in a price for fuel into the future. But of course, to do that, you would want to forecast the price of fuel, because you only want to do that potentially if you think the price of fuel is going to go up, and then you can lock in the price at a lower level, at least into the short or intermediate term future. Of course, right now in certain parts of Europe, they're undergoing an energy crisis. But what some of the businesses do is they have futures contracts for the price of their electricity or their energy up to a certain date. So it gives them sort of the right to have that price up to then. And of course, then they have to redo the contract potentially at a higher rate. So options contracts are kind of a similar idea. The right but not the obligation to purchase or sell a certain asset at a certain time in the future at a certain price. Again, since these are about future values, being able to forecast the value of that asset in the future is very important. Of course, there's personal finance applications, which I wish more people would do. I'm sure some of you out there do, but I do. Things like investments, the value of a home, apartment, or condo, retirement accounts, whether or not that you maybe want to put solar panels on your house. So if you think or are forecasting the value of electricity to go up significantly in the future, then maybe the investment in solar panels now will pay off over time. Well, that's a time series problem. Same thing with electric cars and the price of gasoline. And of course, the emissions that go along with that decision. Educational decisions, watching this video for that matter, health concerns, relationships in your life and career, and so on. So some basic time series forecasting techniques can be applied to your own personal life to help you make better decisions about the future now. Then we have things like recommendation systems, ad services, and social media algorithms. While these are not traditional time series type problems, they are time-based. So a recommendation system on a streaming platform or on a shopping site is going to serve up things to us based on our own prior history of searches or other people's purchases. Ad services are going to give us ads that they think will make us buy something. Of course, social media algorithms are notorious for this type of thing. Text prediction on your phone or on your computer that does some sort of automatic typing for you. Autofill in the browser, of course. And dating apps. I mean, a dating app, modern dating apps, a lot of them are just recommendation systems. So by swiping left or right, for example, you are training that algorithm to serve up the next profile to you that's similar to the ones you accepted. So you're training it constantly over and over and over again. But it's about that next thing that's going to come up in your recommendations. So data considerations, domain knowledge and context. Domain knowledge is crucial for implementing time series. You should know what data to collect, how to collect it, how to visualize it, how to interpret it, and how to communicate it and implement any findings. So having the broad contextual view of the problem. Knowing any prior research or similar forecasting projects for their methods and outcomes can make your project stronger because it's part of this larger research conversation. Knowing if there are any lagged indicators that can give you a jump on the forecast. So I think it's Warren Buffett, who was at one time, or maybe still is, notorious for looking at shipping containers coming into the US or around the rail system in the US or on trucks in the US to know what's going to happen with the economy in the future. If there's a decrease in shipping containers, he might think there's a recession coming. If there's a big uptick in containers, consumer confidence might be higher, and therefore the economy might go through a boom period. So are there any lagged indicators that can give you a jump? But you have to know the domain knowledge and context to do that. Data quality, garbage in, garbage out. Controlling for, at least being aware of, any limitations with respect to data quality. Are there missing values? Are there corrupt values? Are the measures inconsistent from period to period? What are the data sources? Where are they coming from? Can you cross-reference the data with anything? Are there any biases? So like another example, if you're using sensor data for something, did the sensor go haywire? Did something in the sensor go wrong and it's reporting wrong data to you all the time? Knowing the data quality is absolutely crucial, and being able to investigate the data from collection, implementation, all the way through the problem solution process is important. Time frequency. What is the appropriate level of time detail? Too frequent of time detail can capture a lot of noise. Aggregating time into larger units, so it may be taking days and making it into weeks, or weeks into months, can reduce noise, but sacrifice that resolution at the smaller time scale. Now, sometimes aggregated data can be disaggregated and interpolated. That is possible in certain contexts. Specificity. What is the scope of the time series in terms of time period? The population you're looking at, geography, asset class, or other characteristics. How specific are you going to be in your data collection and in your time series analysis? Over-specifying can lead to low or zero counts. So if you're trying to forecast rare events, that can be very problematic. There are ways to do it, but events that have low frequency counts or zeros for long periods of time can be difficult. And then underspecifying can erase distinctions. So if many things are lumped into one large group or one characteristic, we can erase what makes it unique from characteristic to characteristic. So, PHIVES: purpose, horizon, information, value, evaluation, and then I added software and tech. So to really holistically formulate a time series problem from start to finish, these are all the types of things, and there are others too, this is not comprehensive, but these are the fundamental things I would like you to keep in mind when doing sort of time series work, no matter how complex the method you're implementing. So if you're doing very basic, naive or moving average forecasts, or if you're doing complex recurrent neural networks, these things all apply. So think about this broader context and you'll be off to a great start doing high quality, robust forecasts, assuming future conditions are like past conditions. So that wraps up this video on how to formulate time series problems. I really enjoyed this one. It gives context and a broader view of formulating these problems. So I hope you found this helpful in whatever work you're doing, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Take care and bye-bye.